Wendy is with us in studio today and standing by to tackle two major problems, or issues rather. One around sell-by versus best before dates, and the other around small change. Both of them stemming from recent interactions with listeners and authorities. So we'll tackle both of those, and if there's time at the end, some open line calls also welcome. So if you want to ask a question or if you'd like to weigh in on one of those two subjects, please do feel free to call in on 021 446 0567 or to send a voice note to 072 567 1567. Good to have you back with us.
Thank you, Pippa. Good to be here.
Wendy, the National Consumer Commission has announced it's on the trail of retailers selling so-called expired food. And look, on paper, that sounds like a good thing. We want to protect consumers from eating unsafe food. And one of our listeners has already written in on that subject. I'll get to his point in a moment. But yes, obviously, let's just say that up front. It goes without saying, but in case it needs to be said, nobody is suggesting that we should be allowed to sell food that's no longer fit for human consumption. But you've raised a red flag around this investigation, and I think it's a very interesting one. Tell us a bit more.
Thanks, Pippa. It's one that I've been raising for many, many years, every time this happens, which is fairly regularly. So late Friday afternoon, 4:30, ideal time to send out a press release, wouldn't you say?
Because nobody can reply in time, yep.
The National Consumer Commission announced that it sent out a press release stating that it was going after retailers selling expired food. And as you say, that sounds fantastic. And when I spoke to an NCC official on Saturday, she said that there'd been some rotten chicken and foaming juice, and who wouldn't want
Absolutely,
our government
you want that off the shelf, yeah.
Exactly. But the problem is that once again, there isn't a distinction rather drawn between. You said sell-by. That's really a retailer's term that they introduced for their own stock management. It's the two legal date marks, and I say legal. It's the health department's food regulations, right? So I'm not thumb sucking this.
Yeah.
They in short, there are draft regulations out, and who knows when they're going to. They've been out for comment since late last year. But what we're stuck with is 146. Since 146, it's been around since around 2011 or so. And use their date marks. You can't remove any date marks, whatever it is, whether it's a use by or a best before, you can't remove them. So that is illegal. But while it is illegal to sell perishable products with use by date, so there would generally be a short date, right? And these are products that perish relatively quickly. Milk, fresh meat, cheese to some extent, that kind of thing. They have a use-by date on, which means beyond that date you may not sell it. And if you think about the term, it makes sense, right? Use it by this date, consume it, whatever other words. Don't do it after this date, because that presents a food safety risk, right? On the other hand, you have foods that are so-called shelf-stable. So they have a very long shelf, which will tell you, and the term is, the date mark is, or expiry date, if you want to call it that in a catch-all phrase, which is misleading, is best before. The draft regulations have actually tried to insert some clarity there, and actually, if they get passed in the current form, they'll be called best quality before, to try and tell you it's about quality. So that pack of biscuits that was the Christmas special, that's now I don't know, it would probably have 6 months to a year's shelf life. The best before would be that long,
quite long. Yeah.
Like if it goes on special 2 months after the best before date somewhere, it's just ideally it should be discounted. The law doesn't say it has to be discounted. You are absolutely, there's nothing in law that prohibits any retailer from continuing to sell products that are past their best before or best quality before date, because doesn't present a health issue. It's not a food safety risk. It means the quality might be as good. But if you think about it, it's got this long shelf life after manufacture, so that it tells you the deterioration in that product is very slow unless the pack is open and there's some kind of compromise, right?
Yeah.
But once it's sealed, as long as it remains sealed, the deterioration of that product is very slow, right? So does it make sense that a day, a week, or even a month or two after that date, it's suddenly toxic? But this is the language that we're hearing, right? So to get back to the release from the National Consumer Commission, they're calling their raids compliance inspections, and they say it's to ensure that unsafe and expired goods that have passed their shelf life. This is very non-specific
Specific, yeah.
language, and I'm saying it's a fellow government department that has provided us with the appropriate language. Anyway, they want them removed from the shelves, and they started with some shops in Limpopo, right? They've joined forces with the Departments of Labour, Health, Home Affairs, Police, Environmental Health, Waste Management under the Capricorn District Municipality to inspect various retailers in that province. And here, for me, is the problematic, and not just me, a whole host of food scientists, because this is a scientific issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't have alternative science facts. You know what I mean? That it is what it is.
The food is
You
either
can't have an opinion on a scientific
toxic
fact.
or not. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So the team discovered that there's widespread non-compliance, especially of goods that have passed their sell-by, use-by, or best-before dates. So the problem there is the best before date, right? The non-compliant goods were duly removed from shelves and confiscated. Baby foods. Now, interestingly, the draft regulations have introduced this thing that even though they are shelf stable and they have a long shelf life, if that passes the way it's currently stated, and I think it's a good thing, it will exclude any baby product, because that just
you can't take any risk.
No, exactly.
There's
Rather,
just no
I've always
tolerance for
had a
risk
problem
there,
with that. So, but for now, actually, you can continue to sell baby food past its expiry date. So currently in law, there is no prohibition to that. But anyway, so they've confiscated baby food, sweets, cool drinks, noodles, snacks, tinned foodstuff, juices, and other consumables, with the potential of causing harm and compromising the health of consumers. Okay. Then there is an equally reprehensible practice that the inspection uncovered, which is the retention of goods past date markings and continuing to sell them to consumers at discounted prices. These supplies are self-serving and are not driven by consumer interest. No discount is worth the health or well-being of consumers. Now, I've spoken to maybe 6 food scientists
in the last week.
In the last, and they're all like, "Oh, give me a break! That is so." It's alarmist, and it's not true. So obviously, if a can is bloated or leaking, that will indicate to you that there's been some penetration of the seal. And
nobody in their right mind is going to eat
say
something out of a bulging tin of
trust
soup,
your
right?
eyes there,
Okay.
But so when I've confronted the
commissioner,
not the commissioner, the Prudence Moilwa, who is the head of complaints and investigations with the NCC, on Saturday morning, we had quite a spirited conversation.
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, we confiscated," I say, the rotten chicken. And I said, "Of course I'm glad you did. Of course you should have. That should never be on sale at any price. I mean, that is a safety issue, obviously. But dry noodles on the shelf.
A month after their best before
some
date.
tin products.
Not an issue.
There were extreme cases, the tins with best before, like January last year. And anyway, so she'd used the word toxic and rotten a lot, and these are very emotive words that give consumers, so most consumers see any date and think, okay, if it's after that date, the food is rotten and toxic, it's going to make me sick, which is really not based on any scientific facts.
Can we maybe interject here to give an example to demonstrate? So that packet of Christmas biscuits that you bought that was manufactured in November and has a best before date of April, May. Wendy, on the 1st of June, they might not be quite as crunchy as they were on the 1st of December or on Christmas Day, but they're still going to be perfectly good to eat and perfectly good to use in your biscuit base for your tart or put in your tiramisu.
Obviously,
the point is,
if you didn't leave them on the back, on the shelf and the back of your car in the heat and the sun for months, I mean, you use your...
Yeah, you didn't see that a bug had entered the packet.
It will say store in a cool, dry place or something on the pack, because some of them will have icing on it, whatever. Within reason, you've got to be reasonable about this sort of thing. But it's not that it's going to make you sick. It's about it won't be, the colors might fade a little bit or whatever, but it's going to take a very long time. It doesn't suddenly on the next day become,
deathly poisonous.
And that's an important issue that you've raised, because Ms. Moiwa, when I spoke to her about this, and in the press release, they talk about, because I kept going, you're actually illegally confiscating stuff past its best by date, unless it's obviously bloated, rotting, full of mold or something, because there's no law that supports this. The health department's own food labeling laws doesn't make it illegal in terms of shelf stable best before products, right? And she says, but Section 55 of the Consumer Protection Act gives consumers the right to have good quality food. That's what they're going on.
Mm-hmm.
But as a food scientist was explaining to me just this morning, and many others would say the same thing, it's talking about peak quality, right?
Yeah.
Because also when you come to these issues, you've got to the science is more important, and it's the health department that involves themselves in scientific realities, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's still the day after and the month after that, and in some cases many months after that, it's still good quality. It's just not. It's not going to compromise your health or whatever. It just doesn't mean it's at absolute peak. And bear in mind also, the manufacturers themselves will tell you, probably off the record because they don't want to give the wrong impression, but those best before dates are extremely conservative.
Yeah.
They absolutely err on the side of caution. So in a country that is where so many millions of people are food insecure, right? To have this this kind of compliance action, to use their words, raids, to use
that doesn't discriminate between the two.
It doesn't discriminate. It doesn't educate consumers. It doesn't help them. I mean, there are stores that
specialize in selling at reduced
exactly.
cost.
And they've so I said, "Oh, you're now going to go after them because you heard what I said there from the release," and I was told, "Well, it's not in the short term planning, but possibly." It's quite vague on that.
Well, this is what Vic was asking about, who emailed me earlier. He says, well, I understand perishables due dates need to be watched. Many other foods are still good after the best before date.
There's an understanding.
Shops like Looters, etc., sell these, and as far as I know, no one's ever gotten sick from those products. So why would government go after those? He said, perfectly understand going after a shop that has rebanded or redated and is illegally selling dangerous goods. That's a totally different scenario. Yeah. But on that note, Wendy, we have listening in and about to join us somebody who has experience from a retail perspective in offering the sale of goods that are a little bit past their best before date. And I want to say thank you so much to Dave Bester for joining us, who is the owner of the Foodies chain, which sells, amongst other items, goods that are past the best before date. Dave, thank you very much for joining us. Good afternoon.
Hi, Pippa. Hi, Wendy.
Hello, Dave. For context, could you start by telling us how long you've been trading or how long you've been running this business and how many stores you currently have?
Yeah, I've been involved for the last 9 years. The business or the industry has been going a little bit longer, but I've been involved in Foodies for the last 9 years.
Okay.
We've got 6 stores currently in Cape Town, and it's really our focus in Cape Town. We had delusions of grandeur of expanding at one stage, but we're not doing that anymore. So we're focusing on Cape Town.
So having received this press release late Friday, I visited one of your stores, the one in Somerset West, on Saturday morning, and had a good look at your stock there. So not all of it is past its expiry dates. I'm doing it. The best before dates. Some were well within them. But won't you tell us? You told me off air that you do impose certain limits on how far past a best before date you will consider selling something. Won't you just share that with us, please?
Sure, Wendy. It's really about consumer perception. I mean, because I've been involved in this business for this long, I know that I think it was in the US, the Smithsonian Institute that said that the lifespan of a canned product will outlive any of us.
Yeah.
It's not going to be that pretty inside, but the lifespan's fine. It's not going to be a food safety issue. So the key thing for me is about perception. We do get products that sometimes are a little bit long after date. I don't buy them anymore for our shop because I think consumer perception is, okay, I understand this in a couple of months after the best before date, there's no issue. I think it's kind of doesn't do our reputation any good if we're sitting with products that are 2-3 years after date, even though they are 100% fine. So we've just done a self-imposed kind of limitation on it and said, okay, we'll go a couple of months past date, but no further than that. And invariably, if we end up with stock that is that far or getting close, we'll just discount it like mad and move it all out.
Okay. And given what the Commission is now doing and has done in the past, and it's certainly been done by environmental safety officers in some cases in municipalities, have you ever had any heat from the authorities where someone's want to come in misguidedly without any legal justification and want to, clear your shelves of so-called expired goods?
Look, it happens every now and again. In 2016, we had a big to-do with the National Consumer Commission regarding the Consumer Protection Act,
I remember
where they sent actually 6 inspectors down from Pretoria, and they threatened to close us down and all of that. But there it was clear that they were misreading their own or the kind of laws regarding non-perishable and perishable food items. Anyway, we cleared the decks there and everything was fine. And we work very closely with the health department. All of our stores have the certificates of acceptability. They visit us every few months. They check up on everything, that everything's good. But occasionally you get a new health inspector that doesn't really know the laws. And, Wendy, when we spoke the other day, you spoke about dented cans. And I mean, that is a very specific one because we do sell dented cans. I mean, it depends on how badly dented they are, but we do sell dented cans. And invariably, a health inspector, a new person may come in and say, oh, you've got to take this off the shelf. We refuse because we know legally we are 100% within our rights in terms of being able to sell that. So, yes, we have dented cans. We have a bit, but not that much heat anymore. Quite honestly, we collaborate with the departments as much as we can.
One last question quickly, Dave, before we have to cut to news, and that is, have you ever had a food safety incident where that has been traced back to someone buying a product that's past its best before date from one of your stores?
Never, not once in all the 9 years that I've been involved in this business. Have we ever had an issue like that? Occasionally we've had people, because there's a bit of Jippo guts going around and people go, oh, it must be something I bought from Foodies. But no, we've never had an issue at all. And we won't, because the food can't make you sick. It's a non-perishable product. It's a fact. It cannot make you sick.
Dave Bester, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, owner of the Foodies chain, and a couple of our listeners commenting how much they love being able to shop and take advantage of the discounted rates. Let me start with this one. Dion writing in to say, I'm confused. As a consumer, are we supposed to calculate time when a product is safe to consume, e.g. when buying a product, irrespective of where it's sold? The markings on the can should give a clear indication to consumers without having to calculate time. It also sounds like Wendy is complaining about the health department being overzealous. I'm confused by this. Would you like to respond?
Well, it's not absolutely not the health department being overzealous. It's the National Consumer Commission. When I say overzealous, I mean it's what they're doing is this is a nuanced issue. You've got perishable date marks and you've got shelf-stable food date marks because they are two very different animals. If it's got a use-by date on it, it means don't use it after that date because it's a food safety issue. These are perishable products. There will be microbiological issues, right? The second one, the bag of crisps, the noodles, whatever, on the shelf, very long lifespan outside of the fridge until you open it, right? And air gets in and then
it deteriorates fast after that.
Then it's a few days, right? So there's also a global food waste issue around this. You can Google it. All countries are complaining that so much of the food that's wasted is because of misunderstanding and unnecessary disposal of shelf-stable foods that are past their best before date. As I said, the new food labeling regulations proposed by the health department will propose that it's called best quality before, to try and tell consumers that it's not a food safety issue.
It's a food quality issue.
So I hope that makes it clear. No, you're not. What you're supposed to do is, if you're in your own kitchen and in your grocery cupboard, there's a tin of baked beans that was said best before February 2024, that you don't throw it in the bin, because you don't have to. It's still going to be fine.
It might just not be 100% perfect quality. It might be at 97.
I don't think anyone but a scientist in a lab would be able to actually tell you that short after that there's any difference at all. And I actually spoke to a canning production expert. She didn't want me to reveal who she was. She's recently retired from a major company. Okay. This is her wheelhouse, right? This is her thing. And she said to me, I would happily eat canned food a year to 18 months past its best before date. It would be absolutely fine, unless the can was bloated or leaking and there were obvious issues. Where there have been can recalls, there have been a particular production. Do you remember the coup and all the rest of them? Not that long ago? There was a particular production issue with the seal there, and so they took the precautionary measure of recalling all of them, because maybe some of them also had, a puncture and air got in, and then you've got problems, right? And then you don't want to take those risks.
Totally different issue from an intact can.
Exactly.
That's been on
so
the shelf.
it's at peak quality up until the best before date, and after that the quality deteriorates at a similar, very, very slow rate from as it did from date of production, and for years. I did speak to many canning experts because the Commission's compliance investigations managers did say that there were a manufacturer of cans did say that from best before date the lining of the tin gets compromised, and then the food interacts with the can, and then there's an issue. And so I spoke to several canning experts, and they said that is of course a possibility, but it's a very, very, very
Slow
tiny
process.
and usually you can see it in the can visually from the outside, and this is something I wouldn't have thought, that I've learned in the last couple of days. I would say, which is the most reliably safe can of food that you would eat like months or year or two afterwards? And it's meat. The meat, the fish, whatever. It's the tomato. A tomato, like a tin of tomatoes. A lot of us buy those chopped. They would, most cases, are very, 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 very high likelihood that those would still be fine long time after their best before. But they would tend to, there was a problem, it would tend to be those in terms of safety.
Is that maybe because of it's
high
quite
acid.
acidic, so the acid might interact with the
And
container
interestingly, the fruit products don't have a lined can because they have direct contact with the tin itself, because that actually the interaction of the two actually prolongs, makes them more sort of food safe, and also the color doesn't deteriorate.
Oh, that's interesting.
So they would be brownish without it. It's just a perception thing, but they stay beautifully colorful, pears or peaches or whatever, because the fruit is in direct contact with the can. Just a bit of useless information that I picked up.
Few of our listeners have paid in this space, and I just want to share with you the messages. LK saying, I, the other day, had a lovely smearing of caramel from a tin marked best before 2019, but the can was not bloated at all. The a comment I wanted to make was, it really pays to use your senses. If you are going to decide that you are happy to take the risk, or it's not even a risk, but to understanding what you've said about
And
best
also
before being a
just-
quality mark.
Yes.
Wendy, if the can is visibly bulging, if there is an obvious break in the seal, if it hisses when you open it, if it bubbles up when you open it,
It'll
or
literally
if it smells
shout
funny,
at you that it's
telling
something
you
wrong.
there's a
Yes.
problem. If you open it up,
And you know what?
everything else looks and smells
Usually,
fine.
if there's a problem, it's going to present long before the best before date,
Yeah.
right? If there's a problem with
Correct.
the integrity of the can. And just about the caramel, that's
Yes.
sugar basically, and sugar and sweets don't have to have a expiry date or a date mark because they last indefinitely. Same with vinegar. Yeah.
Funny, I noticed that I'm literally in the midst of going through my 6-monthly check the pantry, check all
Good
the
for
check all the
you.
dates. And the one thing I looked at the other day, then I was like, where is the
No,
mark
it
on this?
doesn't
Where are the
have to
mark on
have.
this? And I
That's
realized
why.
you're holding a bottle of vinegar.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
All right, the other person says, don't judge me, but I found 2 cans of pineapples in my cupboard from 2017. But when I shook them, they sounded like the apples had gone dry.
Oh.
Okay, well, 2017 was 7 years
Try.
ago.
That's interesting.
So
I would have loved her to open the can and tell us what she
yeah,
found.
I wonder if you did. She's
Yeah.
shy to tell us if she put them in a pie and baked them and ate them. But I'd be interested to know if you did open it, what you saw.
So it's short. I mean, I think it's wonderful that I wish we had more enforcement in this country of our various laws. And yes, those retailers, and I think in some of those rural places, those traders are not doing their customers any favors. They just have no ethics, and they're selling
The ones who
food.
are mucking
Yes,
around with the dates.
But
yeah.
my issue is confusing that with shelf stable foods with best before dates, where legally they can be sold. They can continue to be sold. The law doesn't even require them to be discounted, which obviously they should if they passed peak quality. But to understand the difference between a safety risk with the use by dates on perishable food and the slow quality deterioration in a food, shelf stable food past its best before date. If it's got a long shelf life, it stands to reason that any deterioration in a food that hasn't been got a defective tin or whatever is going to then deteriorate equally very slowly after peak So in the months after peak,
It's still going to be
it's
fine.
still going to be good quality. It doesn't mean that you have the right now to confiscate and
And
destroy.
I
It's
take
such a
your point.
waste.
It's a waste of food, and it's also very confusing for consumers when what
Educate the
consumers need is
consumers.
clarity on the difference.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Dion's written a follow-up to say thank you. Wendy is such a wealth of knowledge. I will take her advice anytime.
Ooh.
So appreciate the follow-up, Dion. We have, I believe, got 2 voice notes on this. Let's take a quick listen.
Try living on a SASSA pension with 2 adult sons who can't get jobs, and not go prowling around looking for markdown food. I buy plenty of markdown food, and unfortunately we're all still alive.
Afternoon, Pippa, your conversation with topic with expired and best before dates. We got a few nice places, but in Durbanville, Tiger Valley area, Mad Foods, which is near High Street, Bella Rosa, actually to be exact, and there's one in Northumberland Street called Fancy Foods, and I'm still here to tell the story. Be Tiger Valley. Have a lovely day.
Thanks, B. Thank you for that. Somebody following up on the apples saying pie apples are not in syrup or juice, so they basically are almost dry to start
Oh,
with,
I
says
see.
Ingrid. I haven't made an
Oh.
apple pie in so long. I
I-
hadn't thought of that, but there we go.
I use fresh apples, but yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Just before we leave this topic to move on to the coins, somebody asking for clarity, where does the term sell-by fit
Okay,
in?
thank you for that question. So that was introduced. It wasn't in the original still currently applicable 146 food labeling regulations, and it does feature in the new draft regulations. But it's introduced by the retailers as their form of stock control, and what it's saying is it doesn't mean it literally saying what it's saying. It means what it says: sell by. So they're not going to that date. I mean, if that was don't eat it after this date, that would imply that you'd have to eat it in the taxi on the way home or the car or whatever. I mean, it doesn't make sense. So there are a few days after that date, but there has to be a use by date. On a perishable food, they have to give a definite used by this date and no later. So sell by
sell-by is
confuses
an in-house term.
and we like to
for
use
stock
it
control.
colloquially as like pass my sell by.
Yeah.
But I think that my basic thing is that if the government's going to confuse us, the legislation is there for us to look up, and stories and features like the one we're doing now are freely available with the Google. So educate yourself. Because wastage is just so unfortunate and unnecessary.
Well, if nothing else, we've made one listener, Mark, laugh. They've just written in to say, I'm canning myself with the caller who said,
Excuse the pun.
unfortunately, they're all still alive. Very appropriate choice of phrasing. Thank you. This is funny. Marcel listening to us in Ohio. Hi, Marcel. He says there was a story here in the States a few weeks back where they found George Washington's canned cherries after a couple of 100 years, and they're apparently still good.
I've heard those stories.
Okay.
I want to just share one more thing that I
Yes.
didn't. Sorry, I forgot. That canning expert that I quoted who said she'd happily eat any canned good
Yes.
a month to 18 months, whatever. Up to 18 months later. She said in many third world countries, and she named Brazil as one of them, the government has a team of scientists which assess foods on or near very close to their best before dates. We're talking shelf-stable foods, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they assess them for their integrity. And if they're fine, those foods then get discounted and sold. So that, I mean, there's a huge poor population, and that
Yeah.
food does not get wasted.
Absolutely.
So there's
I mean, that's
such
crucial.
a big and so why don't you put your expertise towards that? Involve the scientists, get them on board, have this panel, and
make sure it's food safe.
yes,
and
put the
move it
stamp
into
of
the market.
approval on,
Yeah.
and instead of demonizing, perfectly good food.
Right, we must quickly wrap up with the coin issue before we say goodbye,
Yes.
Wendy. And this is an interesting one, looking at the issue of small change and apparently a shortage of small change in the market. What's happening?
It was an interesting case to look into, Pippa. So it began when I was tagged on a tweet, an ex-post by Jason Bunding about KFC. And it went like this: I've noticed that that's KFC, don't give change for 10 cents when paying cash. It's over the last 6 months, buying every 2 weeks. So you make 10 million to 20 million rand a year on pure profit based on your national sales. So I took it up with KFC, of course, and they in short told me that their stores were battling to get stock of 10 and 20 cent pieces from the banks. I'm waiting for a new fuller response as to what the response will then be, because obviously they're not going to condone shortchanging of their customers, right? There should never be.
Yes.
No. And then I checked with the supermarket group Boxer, because they have a high proportion of cash-paying customers. And they said they confirmed the shortage, but said it had not affected our business as yet. We are aware of the shortages across the country, and we are prepared and work with our various cash drop supply suppliers to stay informed and make appropriate plans. So I went to the Reserve Bank, and I was kept waiting for a response, but shortly before we came to air, a Reserve Bank spokesman told me, in terms of the production of all coins, we do not have a shortage of denominations currently. So I don't know if it's the bank's fault. The retailer's obviously going to their local banks. But the bottom line is on this issue that you should never allow yourself to be shortchanged. If a retailer insists on this, to me, absurd convention of having prices that still end in 99 cents or 95 cents or 98 cents, when the 1 and 2 cents
have been
and 5 cents have they're still legal tender, but they're not minted anymore,
yes.
right? Then they must be prepared to round the price down to the consumer benefit, or the consumer must, or give them whatever change they have, 10, 20, 50, 1 rand. But the point is the consumer should never be shortchanged. There's no reason for it. If they can't get the coins, adjust the prices. So, I feel very strongly about this issue, because it's not just about the money. It's about, if you're prepared to treat your customers like that, what else that's not ethical and compliant are you willing to do?
Yeah,
for me, it's a demonstration of your ethics, of your attitude towards your customers, right? So I really do encourage any of our listeners that are ever shortchanged to let us know, so that I can take it up. And what always happens, it's usually a big brand, and they'll say, "Oh, this isn't our policy. We'll take it up," and that should never happen. But it doesn't help the person then at the till who's faced. And it's embarrassing to say, "Where's my 10 cents?" They don't want to do that necessarily.
But you have the right to ask for it, yeah.
Imagine if you short paid somebody in cash by 10 cents. They wouldn't say, it's fine.
Fine,
off
here,
you go.
Take your couch.
I mean, maybe some would, but it wouldn't be a policy of, if someone's short of a few cents here and there, just give them the product. So why should it work in the reverse?
Absolutely. So again, if it happens to you, you have the right to push back and say, no, I'm entitled to change, and they should err on the side of you being the recipient of the extra rather than them.
Because they can change the prices. Yeah. They can make it 18 Rand, not 17.95 or 17.99.
And make the problem go away.
Yes.
Wendy, before we must wrap up in a minute's time, on this note, a listener of ours, James, wrote in with his own frustration about small change. He has packets. Maybe there's a shortage because James is holding on to them all. He's got packets of 10 cent and 20 cent coins, which he took into an ABSA branch the other day and said, please, will you exchange these for 1 Rand and 2 Rand coins? And the answer was no, because you don't have an account with this bank that they can be deposited into. And he wrote in to say, why can you only change with use of an account? Why do I need to deposit coins into an account on which I'll have to pay bank fees? And then when I withdraw coins again, I have to pay more bank fees. Are the commercial banks not representatives of the Reserve Bank? Are these coins not legal tender? Surely I should have been allowed to exchange them.
Short answer from the Reserve Bank. If James of Claremont banks with ABSA, he's allowed to exchange money without paying depositing and withdrawal fees, but ABSA, like other banks, apply their limits and pack the coins in accordance with the South African Reserve Bank standard, which is explained in this link, which is a long link, but basically if you Google Reserve Bank and banknotes and coins, or it will come up. So, when coins are deposited at a commercial bank, such deposits must follow the Reserve Bank standards. They must be separated per denomination and series, and that's when it gets complicated. So you need to do your homework. You can't put, not all 10 cents are from the same series.
James did say he had done that. He'd been very, very meticulous in how they'd been grouped. Yeah.
So they're 3D series and 4D series. And then also commercial banks will not process coin deposits that are not presented according to that. And so it's too complicated to go into. But essentially, also in terms of trying to find it, the coin deposit limits mentioned for bank tellers, because you only put like 100 10-cent pieces in a bag, and you have to go through it. Commercial banks are under no obligation to accept or exchange coins for individuals who have not undergone the Know Your Customer vetting process as their own customers. So
they were within their rights to say, James, sorry,
exactly,
you're not a customer of this bank.
As all banks
we don't
do,
have to.
Yeah, as with any other transaction.
Thank you very much for the feedback, Wendy. Appreciate it. We have to wrap up there. Wendy, great to have you with us again today. Thank you for all the work you do on behalf of our customers and listeners.
Lunch with Pippa Hudson
on Cape Talk.